This is a Sports Cutastrophe production. Hey there, Heather, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, October 12th, 1989, the Dallas Cowboys made a gigantic move to get rid of their one key piece and trade him to the Minnesota Vikings. Everyone knows it's the Herschel Walker deal. You see the trade tree there, and I'll be talking about the tree in a sense. But anyway, some background must be made. The Dallas Cowboys were a decent team in the early 80s, but by the mid 80s they were starting to slide down. It was so bad that when Bum Bright sold the team to Jerry Jones, the new owner decided to get rid of the only head coach in Dallas history, which was Mr. Tom Landry, and dump him off for Jimmy Johnson, his Arkansas roommate in the 1964 National Championship squad in college football. So Jimmy Johnson came from the University of Miami and went all the way to, Dallas to coach. The 89 Cowboys were not doing so hot. They couldn't win a game to save their lives. And they had two quarterbacks fighting out for a spot. Jimmy Johnson had Steve Walsh, his quarterback from Miami, and also Troy Aikman, who the Cowboys got first overall in the 1989 draft. So they were going nowhere. The only key player for the Dallas Cowboys was Herschel Walker. Great runner. He came from the USFL. He had lost a little bit of speed. He was great and all that. And anyway, it was just huge and all that. So anyway, Jimmy Johnson actually figured he decided to trade Walker, saying that the poor performance can only be remedied by blockbuster trade. Jimmy Johnson even said he briefly considered trading Michael Irvin to the Raiders, but Al Davis talked him out of the deal, which was weird for an owner of the opposing team to do that. Saying, who's going to catch passes for you? So Herschel Walker was the only bargaining chip they had. So teams would contact the Cowboys when they announced they were going to trade Herschel Walker. The Giants were one of the big front runners because, after all, in the Meadowlands, the New Jersey Generals did play in the USFL. And, it would be nice to go full circle and be at Giant Stadium. Unfortunately, Dallas did not want to make the trade because it was the fact that it was a division rival, and you do not do that. Atlanta actually had a chance to, but they pulled out because of the contract demands Herschel Walker probably would put on them. And Cleveland gave him an offer. Jimmy Johnson said that the Browns offered as a player some number 1 draft picks and 3 number 2 draft picks. The Cowboys figured that this was favorable, and they figured if another team were to enter into the discussion, they could do a bidding war. So they decided to contact other clubs to generate buzz. And Minnesota came along. GM Mike Lynn said that it'd be huge. Jerry Johnson actually said that he was going to trade Herschel Walker to Cleveland. And if Minnesota would like to trade for Walker, it would cost them players, draft picks, conditional picks, and provisions, and have a deadline for 6/30. Minnesota were desperate. They had a chance a couple years ago, prior, to get to the Super Bowl, but lost to the Redskins in the 1988 NFC title game, and then lost to the Niners in the divisional playoffs. They hadn't been to the Super Bowl since 1977, and they're 0-4 relay. So anyway, they figured that they needed a running back, so he was interested. Negotiations ensued, and Walker was given $1.25 million by the Cowboys as an exit bonus. So anyway, there would be a major trade, in fact. Now, there was a massive reason why Cleveland was interested in Herschel Walker in the first place, because their big, powerful back Kevin Mack had been caught with drugs and was serving a massive drug suspension. So that basically meant that Cleveland could not ride Ernest Biner forever. And I think Cleveland fans were still pissed off with Biner for causing the fumble that cost them the chance to get to the Super Bowl in 1988. So anyway, Cleveland had to try to look for Kevin Mack and all that. They needed something. And it looked good, but Minnesota made the offer. So anyway, Dallas agreed to trade Herschel Walker and 3 draft picks to Minnesota. In exchange, the Cowboys would get from the Vikings 5 players, 3 draft picks, and conditional picks attached to each player if Dallas cuts them before February 1st, 1990. Unfortunately, Darren Nelson refused to leave Minnesota for Dallas. But Dallas decided, why not? We'll trade Darren Nelson to the Chargers for a 5th-round pick in 1990, and then the Cowboys would send that to the Vikings. So it was 18 players and draft picks. And they even made a deal with Darren Nelson so they could go to the Chargers. So anyway, so here's what the trade was. The Chargers got Darren Nelson, while Minnesota was supposed to trade him to Dallas, but he refused to report. Minnesota ended up getting San Diego's 5th-round pick in 1990 as a condition to that Dallas trade. And then Dallas would do some stuff. So Dallas traded Herschel Walker, Dallas' 3rd-round pick in 1990, 10th-round pick in 1990, and 3rd-round pick in 1991. Vikings would send 4 players, Jesse Solomon, David Howard, Isaiah Holt, and Alex Stewart. 1st-round pick in 1990, 2nd-round pick in 1990, and 6th-round pick in 1990. And then the conditional picks were huge. Because the Vikings made a mistake thinking that the Cowboys would only keep the 3 picks they got from Minnesota for the 1990 draft. And would retain the players instead of cutting or trading them away. But Jimmy Johnson didn't care about the players. He just cared about the draft picks. All that. Johnson would waive Alex Stewart in November. And based on that, he got Minnesota's 3rd-round pick in 1992. And then he basically told his coaches, don't use Solomon, don't use Howard, and don't use Holt. I want the draft picks. So basically, when they cut Jesse Solomon, Minnesota had to give up their 1st-round pick in 91. Cutting Howard cost Minnesota their 2nd-round pick in 1991, and Isaiah Holt was cut, and the Vikings. And anyway, Minnesota's 1st-round pick in 92 was there. So that's what happened. All that. However, Jimmy Johnson actually did have second thoughts about the February 1st deadline and traded 3 future draft picks for the right to retain the original full package of draft choices plus those guys. The funny thing about Isaiah Holt was that he actually was the only one staying on the Cowboys, and he actually played in Super Bowl 27 when Dallas crushed Buffalo in Divine Powder. So anyway, the question on everyone's lips was, what did Dallas do with all those picks they picked up from Minnesota? Well, here's what happened. So Minnesota's 1st-round pick in 1990. Dallas didn't keep it. Dallas actually made a deal with Pittsburgh to trade up from 21 to 17. So Minnesota's pick was 21. So they wanted to go up in the draft pool. So they did. They traded with Pittsburgh, got the 17th pick. So it was Pittsburgh getting the 21st pick for Minnesota's 17th pick. No, so Dallas got number 17, Pittsburgh got number 21. And guess who Dallas used to get that pick? None other than Emmitt freaking Smith. That's right. The Cowboys picked a great running back from Florida by the name of Emmitt Smith with that pick that they traded to Pittsburgh. Anyway, Minnesota's 2nd-round pick in 1990, the Cowboys didn't really keep it. They decided to get San Fran's 3rd-round pick in 1990. But that pick actually was also packaged to Pittsburgh to get to number 17. Minnesota's 6th-round pick in 1990 was used as Dallas traded it to the Raiders to get a defensive back by the name of Stan Smagala. That didn't work out too well. Minnesota's first round pick in 91 was used to get the number 1 pick from the Patriots. So Dallas traded that first round pick to New England to get the number 1 overall pick because the Pats were 1-15. They were terrible. Yes, the Patriots were that shit in the early 90s. Dallas used that pick to get Russell Maryland, a very good defensive tackle. Minnesota's second round pick in 91 was actually used as a trade to Houston to get Alonzo Highsmith, the former Miami star running back, and Jimmy Johnson obviously knew him from his college days. So yes, so Minnesota's pick was sent to Houston to get Alonzo Highsmith. Minnesota's first round pick in 92 was used as a deal to get New England's first and second round picks in 1992. The number 19 and the number 37 pick. But they used the number 19 pick to trade to Atlanta to get the number 17 pick and took Kevin Smith, a decent cornerback. The 37th pick, or round 2 pick, was actually used by the Cowboys to draft Darren Woodson. And that was a huge move to get Darren Woodson. So the Pats could have had Darren Woodson. Ugh. Yikes. And Russell Maryland. Yikes. Minnesota's second round pick in 92 was used to acquire draft picks from the Chiefs. And then those Chiefs picks were traded to Washington. And with Washington's third round pick, Dallas took Clayton Holmes. Okay? And the third round pick in 92 by Minnesota was used to get New England's first and second round picks in 92. So man, New England was desperate and would trade with Dallas. Unfortunately though, the Vikings, despite getting Herschel Walker, did make the playoffs, but they lost to the Niners again in the divisional playoffs. They would use all 4 picks, the 3 picks from Dallas and the pick from San Diego, because of Darren Nelson holding out, to pick players. Unfortunately, though, Mike Jones, Reggie Forden, and Pat Newman were all busts. All that. Jake Reed, who was taken with Dallas' third round pick in 91, actually was a decent, serviceable receiver for Minnesota in the 90s. And the funny thing was, Darren Nelson was re-signed by the Vikings in 1991. So Minnesota got Darren Nelson back, but he only played 2 seasons with them. Unfortunately, though, the Vikings really ended up on the wrong side of the deal. They haven't been to the Super Bowl since 1977 still. Herschel would play 2 more years with the Vikings, and they missed the playoffs both times. Herschel would then go to free agency and sign with Philly, and then with the Giants, and rejoin the Cowboys for the 96 season. It was like, well, Minnesota just got fleeced. It was massive, and all that. The great trade robbery, as it was. Minnesota has been regretting that ever since. So practically, the Cowboys got 3 Super Bowl wins: Emmitt Smith, Russell Maryland, Kevin Smith, and Darren Woodson using draft picks. And the Vikings got Jake Reed, okay, fine, but 0 Super Bowl appearances. Let's not forget, of course, that choke job in 99, when the Vikings had a chance to go to the Super Bowl, but Gary Anderson missed wide left. Indoors. If it was because of the wind, fine. But because it was indoors, no excuse. No excuses whatsoever. And that's how it is. It was a great trade robbery. Damn right. And it started Dallas' dynasty. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do